are welcome to the module on curriculum studies in physics, and we are still looking at Unit 3 of this module. We will be looking at Session 2 of Unit 3, and in Session 2 of this unit, we will be looking at the Wheeler's model of curriculum planning. Patrick Ejay is my name. By the end of this session, you should be able to give the schematic diagram of the Wheeler's cyclic model. Then 2, explain the various terms used in the Wheeler's model. Then finally, distinguish between Tyler's model and Wheeler's model. Now let's look at the Wheeler's cyclic model. Now the argument has been that Tyler's model was too simple in that it was only made up of 4 phases, and these 4 phases were also linear. And we saw in the Tyler's model that evaluation can only happen at the end of the entire process. And so the suggestions were that evaluation need not to be terminal, but rather it should take place at every stage. And this is what Wheeler has incorporated in his model to give us a cyclic model. And so this is a schematic diagram of Wheeler's model. And when you look at the various components of Wheeler's model, you realize the components are not different from Tyler. However, he has converted Tyler's model into a cyclic model. So we have the aims, goals, and objectives. Then we have the selection of learning experiences. We have the selection of content. We have organization of learning experiences and content. Then evaluation. Then we come back to the process again. So looking at this, it means at every point we can start the process from every stage. We can just start from selection of learning experiences and continue from there. We can begin with evaluation. We can begin with organization of learning experiences and the content. So because of its cyclic model, this model is continuous in nature, and because of its continuous nature, we can start the process from every phase or every component of this phase. So the next thing we'll be looking at is to look at the various terms that has been used by Wheeler in his model. And the first term is content. And what Wheeler means by content is that content is the body of knowledge or the information. And here it comprises the learning materials for a particular course or a given grade. And the information may consist of related body of facts, laws, theories, and generalizations or descriptions of events as in physics. That is the content. And the content can be considered as that which is presented to students or that which is made available to students for possible use. So that is what Wheeler means by content. Now the next item is the selection of the content. Now every learning experience involves content. And general aims of education need to be translated into more specific goals before they can exert any directive function on the teaching learning process. So before we can achieve the general aims of education, we must translate these general goals into specific objectives. And based on the content that will be selected, based on the learning experiences that will be selected, we can achieve these general aims of education. And the appropriate learning experiences can only be provided through subject matter content. So in our case, physics. So to achieve the general aims of physics, we provide content that are physics inclined. We provide content in the physics area to ensure that the general aims of study in the physics program is being achieved. Now let's continue with the selection of content. So content is important only if it helps to bring about intended outcomes. So when we select content, and the content is unable to bring out the intended learning outcomes, then this content be important, may not be important because it will not help us to achieve the general goals and aims of the physics program. And the content must also be selected carefully in order to provide or facilitate the provision of learning experiences, which will promote the achievement of the intended outcome. So, like we saw in Tyler's model, there must be that interrelatedness. That relationships must be there so that at the end of the day, because the concepts or the contents build on one another, the learning experiences are interrelated, they can help us to achieve the intended learning outcomes. Now let's look at organization and integration of the learning experiences and content. And the content, the organization of the content or the organization of the learning experiences is very, very important. The learning experiences cannot just be presented anyhow. So, for instance, in Tyler's model, we cited an example that if you want to teach Kirchhoff's law, you must first of all introduce learners to Ohm's law as well as basic electrical circuits. Without taking learners through these concepts, it becomes very difficult to introduce learners to Kirchhoff's law. So, organization of content, organization of learning experiences are very, very important when it comes to achievement of intended goals, intended outcomes. And so content and learning experiences are combined in order to set up educational experiences that are designed to achieve the intended outcome. And detailed analysis of subject matter will cast some light on what behavior is specifically determined. So when we look at the various content, what has been stipulated in the program, in the whole curriculum, then it can help us to know the exact behavioral change we want to see in the learners after they have gone through that set of instruction. And also, the subject matter is organized into scope and sequence charts for the various grade levels. So, currently, when you look at science in general or physics, you see at the basic school it is generally science. You realize that electronics is one of the concepts which has been introduced right from primary one through to the senior high school level. But you realize that as the learner moves on, the content increases in that complexity. So the content is being selected based on the grade level, based on the class within which the student is taking or the learner is taking that particular content. And the subject matter is also organized into somewhat detailed teaching scheme. And this detailed teaching scheme is what we call the teaching syllabus. So we have that which will guide us in the selection of the content that is presented to the learners. Now let's look at the differences between Wheeler's and Tyler's model. Now, Wheeler's model has the following characteristics. And we saw that Wheeler's model has 5 phases, unlike the Tyler's model, which has 4 phases. And secondly, Wheeler's model is cyclic in nature. We saw that the Tyler's model is linear, but Wheeler's model is in a cyclic form. And Wheeler's model has partially answered the critics on interaction and interrelatedness. We can even mention that in Wheeler's model, evaluation can take place at any point in time, unlike Tyler's model where evaluation is left to take place at the end of the entire process. Now, students, today we have looked at the Wheeler's model of curriculum development, and we saw that the model has 5 phases. This will bring us to the end of the session. Thank you very much for joining today's session, and see you in the subsequent session. Bye.